Desperate to flee the civil war at home, Syrian refugees in ever greater numbers are risking the perilous journey from North Africa to the Italian island of Lampedusa. So far this month, 2 boats making the trip capsized, claiming more than 500 lives. But as Alan Pizzi reports, the troubles don't end for the refugees who do make it to land.
In an interview with Duncan De La Field from Atlanta's International Rescue Committee, Field says, "Refugees are created through persecution. The legal definition of a refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their home country and is unwilling or unable to return due to persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution." The UN recognizes 5 categories of persecution: race, religion, nationality, social group, or political opinion. Therefore, the ideal situation would be one in which these persecutions do not exist. The United Nations came together in 1951 and drafted the Convention Relating to the Status of Refugees, outlining the legal mandate of the United Nations High Commission on Human Rights and the rights and the responsibilities of refugees. The convention was signed and ratified by 145 nations, including all of Europe. The document enumerates the rights entitled to the refugees by the host nation: non-discrimination based on race, gender, or religion, shelter, food, water, freedom of religion and religious education, and access to courts. Refugees must then abide by their host nation's customs, laws, and regulations, as well as waiting up to 3 years before entering the labor market. A person is deemed to be a refugee after they are approved by a host nation through an application process, and are then awarded the aforementioned rights. Those waiting to get approved are called political asylum seekers, and they are not considered to possess any rights from the host nation until they are proved to be a refugee. Therefore, many political asylum seekers arrive in the European Union to infested living conditions and lack of sustenance. In 2003, the European Union attempted to improve its asylum-seeking process by adopting a series of measures called the Common European Asylum System. It was a futile effort to coordinate criteria, procedures, and legalities of the asylum-seeking process among all of the EU nations. A few main policies that have exacerbated the abuse of political asylum seekers originated from this system. First, the system's mandates are actually just loose directives, unable to be enforced by the European Union's Parliament. Second, a political asylum seeker must apply for asylum in the first European nation they arrive in, thus placing most of the responsibilities on border nations like Greece and Italy. If a refugee attempts to apply for asylum in another nation, they are then detained and shipped like chattel back to the original European nation.
The grief is still raw. Some relatives of those who died have flown here, clutching photos to prove the identity of their brothers, sisters, children. A week on, they're still being told the bodies cannot yet be released for burial. We were given rare access inside Lampedusa's refugee centre. It has room for 250. Many more have crowded in this week. They overflow outside and sleep in the dirt. There are people from Eritrea, Somalia, and those like Saba and her 4 children who didn't want to be identified, fleeing the war in Syria. They paid £3,000 to cross the sea.
It was like a death trip, a suicide trip. I don't recommend it to anyone. We were dying in Syria, and we faced death coming here too. It was only God who helped us make it through.
Divers have now recovered 319 bodies from last week's wreck. On the dockside nearby, the boats that migrants used for the crossings pile up.
Just imagine how desperate you would have to be in order to board one of these death traps and risk your life looking for a better future. And it's not just Syrians coming across on these boats. This year alone, tens of thousands have made this horrendous voyage. While war and poverty continue to fuel this mass migration, there's nothing Europe's politicians can do to stop them coming.
Farshad fled Afghanistan in 2008 after his life was endangered after an attempted murder by the Taliban after working as an interpreter with coalition forces. After being smuggled across the Middle East, he arrived in Greece. The Greek authorities detained Farshad for 7 days and released him with an order to leave the country. Without any identity papers, Farshad traveled to Belgium and applied for asylum. After a series of appeals, the Belgian authorities shipped Farshad back to Greece. Once he arrived, authorities placed Farshad in a small space with 20 other detainees with very limited access to restrooms. For 3 days, Farshad was given very little food, water, and fresh air along with a dirty mattress. Once released, he lived in a park without any means of sustenance while his paperwork was being processed. Farshad, after waiting 2 months in a city park, attempted to leave Greece, but was arrested and detained in the same horrible living conditions for over a week. Farshad, while waiting for a verdict on his status as a refugee, endured horrible living conditions and unnecessary detention.